Okay, hello and welcome to the first official episode of Life at the Chocolate Factory. In this episode, I'm going to talk about how it all started for me, how I ended up here, because it definitely wasn't part of the plan. And I still, sometimes when I think back at how I ended up here, I don't really understand. I understand why I ended up here now, but it's been a really interesting journey. So I think that, it all truly started when I was a young girl, a young child, because that's when it all starts, doesn't it? I was different, very different. I wasn't one to conform to what society wanted me to conform to. I was creative, I was all over the place, and I was feral. I would stand up to adults, I would voice my opinion loudly, I would do whatever I wanted to do, and I had a really, really strong personality. And I wasn't for everyone, and I did hear a lot of people tell me that I needed to calm down, that I needed to contain myself, that I needed to contain my creativity, and that just felt very strange to me because that wasn't who I was and I wasn't going to contain myself. And so when I was little, I think that was the main thing going on in my life, that there was so much within me that needed to be expressed. I found ways to express it. And I just loved creating. But I also felt a lot. I felt a lot of emotions. I started feeling a lot of emotions from a very young age, and we would travel a lot, and so I got to see different parts of the world, and I got to see things that I found really unfair. One thing that I was reacting to a lot as a young child was seeing homeless people or stray cats and dogs. It just broke my heart. And from a very young age, I knew that a change needed to happen in the world. And I knew that I wanted to contribute to that change. I just didn't really know how to go about it because I was this little tornado, and everyone was telling me I needed to calm down, and now I wanted to create change in the world, and I just didn't know how to do it, but I carried that with me. And yeah, I think that was one of the main things for me as a child. And so as I started growing up, I really started to feel that I was different, and that feeling turned into a feeling that was telling me that something was wrong with me, that I wasn't the person that everyone else wanted me to be. And my parents were extremely supportive of my creativity, especially when I was a young child, because I was also very gifted in school. I was really good in school, and I had good grades, and I was doing really, really well. I didn't really have any issues there, but they were also, as I grew up, when I started, reaching my early teens, they were also quite worried for me, because they were like, we love your creative expression, but you need to get educated, you need to do something with your life, you need to be able to make money off what you do, and you have so much talent and so much potential, so you should do something with it. And I didn't really listen to what they were saying at first, because I knew that I wanted a creative career where I could express myself. And at school, I went to a Rudolf Steiner school, a Waldorf school, and it was an environment where I could express myself. We were doing a lot of drama, and when I would come home, I would make jewelry, and it was a lot of creating things. So I didn't really listen to them until I was 14, 15, and that's when fear took over. Fear completely took over. I think that's how I would describe it. Because before that time, I believed in magic. I believed in everything my Roald Dahl books were showing me. I believed in something so beautiful beyond like what we could see. But when I reached 14, 15, I was just filled with so much darkness and fear, thinking that like, no, I'm not gonna survive in this world being different. It's not gonna work out. I can see people suffering and I don't want to be one of them, because I'd heard my entire life that if you don't conform, that's your fate. And I didn't want that for myself. But I still had this like idealistic urge to contribute to this change that I knew was needed. And so I was extremely lost, but I put two and two together and I was like, okay, I will become a diplomat. If I become a diplomat, I will be able to contribute to the change that I believe is needed. And with that realization, I just put all of my creative hobbies away. I pushed them all away and I saw them as something bad. It was bad. It was a part of the old me, the childish me who needed to go away because she didn't have anything good to come with. She was just in the way of my success. And so I pushed her into a corner and I told her she needed to stay there. And I started studying and I poured all of myself into studying. And I started seeing creativity as something bad that you can't really, it's not something that you should put your energy into. And I just focused on studying. And I finished 9th grade and I started high school, and I actually went to boarding school in Pennsylvania. And during that time, I was 16 or 17 when I went away. And during that time, I was like, okay, cool. Like, I'm gonna go to this prestigious prep school and I'm gonna study. And I'm gonna get really good grades and I'm gonna become a really successful politician. But when I got there, my whole environment changed. I had to make new friends, but I also didn't have my family around, and it was a very rigid environment. Although I did enjoy it, I loved the people that I connected with during that time, but a lot of things started coming up within me. And I think it was everything that I had like pushed aside during, my early teens. And I didn't know what to do. There was so much emotion coming up, and I felt like something big was missing within me, but I didn't know what it was. And it was just this horrible feeling. It just felt like a big hole inside of me. And I had this little windowsill that I would sit on, and I just spent most of my time sitting there crying, and it got really, really bad. So I called my mom and I was like, I can't stay here. I need to come home. Because, at that time, at that age, I didn't realize what it was. I was just feeling that, like, okay, something is just wrong with me. So, yeah, I came back and I went to a private school in Stockholm where I studied. I did the International Baccalaureate, and that was an amazing school. It felt much smaller, and I felt like I had more support. I loved that school, and I really like the teachers that I had during my time there. They were the most amazing people ever. So that school and, the Waldorf school that I went to were just like really, really nice schools. So I started there and, I just kept thinking that like, okay, I'm gonna become a diplomat. But obviously I felt completely broken inside, and I was like, I don't even know how to fix this. So I was out partying, I was going to raves, I was living an extremely self-destructive life because so many emotions had come up during my time at boarding school that I didn't want to, process them. And it got really bad. It got really, really bad. Like during one summer, I think I lost, I was overweight as a child, but I lost 35 kilos over 2 months. It was just, or 3 months, I don't know how long it was, but it was just really destructive. But towards the end of high school, before I was graduating, I felt something within me tell me that okay, but you need to do something. You cannot fail high school. You've had good grades up until now, and now you're just you know, ruining everything, and you can't keep doing that to yourself. And so I just stopped hanging out with my friends. I was like, you know what, guys, I need to study. I'm not gonna drink, I'm not gonna do anything, I'm just gonna pass my finals. And I did, and I got pretty good grades. So that was that. And then, you know, I just kept partying. I took a gap year, kept partying, worked as a bartender, and I was just lost. That's how I would put it. I was lost as a person. Right after that, I started studying at Stockholm University because I was like, okay, I have to start studying because, you know, I have this goal of becoming a diplomat and, you know, need to turn it into a reality. And when I started studying, I was studying something I really enjoyed, and I still do. Like, I wouldn't want to work with it, but I really enjoyed my time at university. I really, really enjoyed it. And so I was like, okay, I'll do this. And I started studying, and during that time, around that time, I met my ex-boyfriend, whom I was in a relationship with for 6 years. And that also created a lot of like stability in my life, because before that, I'd just been in really destructive relationships. And so I had that stability of a relationship and studying, and that freed up some time and space for me. So when I came home from university, I started baking, and I found like it was such an amazing outlet for me. I found so much joy in it, but I also saw it as something like, this is not what you should be doing if you want to become a successful person. So it was still very difficult for me to accept that I enjoyed it more than anything, like, you know. And during this time, a lot of people in my family had started going vegan. I hadn't gone vegan myself. I was actually very against it. I felt so much resistance towards it. I am a vegan now. I think I'll go into the story of my veganism in a different episode. But what I found really, I think this was in 2016, and I think what I found really sad was that the vegan options were awful. And I was like, nobody's gonna go vegan if these are the options out there. So I started experimenting, and I came up with a vegan chocolate recipe in my mom's kitchen one day. And my uncle came over, and he had made like a praline, and he had one, and he was like, you need to start selling these. And I was like, don't be silly. I am not gonna start selling these. I'm studying, you know, I'm gonna become a diplomat. I know what I wanna do with my life. Do you think I'm gonna stand there and sell chocolate? Like, it's not gonna happen. And he was like, please, like, just try it. And I was like, no, it's not gonna happen. I had no urge to become an entrepreneur, even though like when I was a child, people really thought I would become an entrepreneur because I had a lot of that in me. But I was like, that's not what I want to do. I don't want to start my own business. I feel so much resistance towards it. But you know, time went by, and he was like, okay, I understand you. But him and my mom were just like, but just try a couple of expos and fairs and just see how people react to your product. That's it. That's all we're asking you to do. I have a business. You don't have to do any of that work. Just go there, stand there, make the products, sell them. And my mom was like, we're gonna support you through this. And so she made like some initial investments into this project, and they were like, just come up with a name. And I was like, okay, Vegan Delights. I'll call it Vegan Delights. And they were like, okay, Vegan Delights. And so I started going to these fairs and expos. And you know, I still had so much darkness within me. I had zero confidence. I felt like a complete imposter. So I remember I was awful. I feel so sorry for my mom for having to deal with me during that time. But I was awful. I would stand there and I wouldn't want anyone to buy my chocolates. I would start crying because I didn't want people to buy my chocolates. I was like, they're awful. Nobody's gonna want to buy them. And you know, I was completely shocked because there were long lines to our stand. And people were like, oh, we love this. And they were taking pictures. They were sharing it to social media. I had influencers talking about my chocolates, and I was like, no, they're bad. Like, they're bad. And I still felt so much resistance towards it because I was like, I don't want to do this because I felt so uncomfortable. I think the level of discomfort I was at was I cannot even explain it. I cannot put it into words. I was just so uncomfortable. And I was so uncomfortable being there representing, my own work. But, demand was high. It just went like, I started, sharing some pictures on Instagram that I had taken on my phone of really, just random chocolates. And we started getting more and more followers and customers who loved our products. So I opened up a web shop and everything would sell out like immediately. And that started getting me into like, okay, maybe there's a demand for my products. Maybe they're not that bad. And that really made me think that like, okay, I'll have this as a hobby. So, for the first time in years, I accepted the fact that like I could have a creative hobby, that creativity wasn't awful. And so I had Vegan Delights as my hobby when I was studying. But it was a journey. During that time, I still felt so much resistance towards it. So it was really hard for me to work with it. And I would have days when I didn't want to create anything. And my mom helped me out so much producing the chocolates, because I would just go into these like moments where I would just freeze and not want to do anything because it was really difficult for me. And so, but I accepted it. I was like, okay, this is my hobby. I did really well at university too. But towards the end of my studies, when I was writing my thesis, I started feeling resistance towards what I was studying, because I stuck to my plan. Even though I had Vegan Delights as a hobby, even though it was growing, I stuck to my plan. I was like, I'm gonna become a diplomat. This is just a hobby. But when I was writing my thesis, I couldn't come up with anything. I had straight A's throughout university. Like, I had really good grades. But when I was writing my thesis, nothing would come out. Like, I didn't want to do it. I sat with that thesis for 2 years. I'm not kidding you. Like, it was really bad. And I couldn't get anything to come of it. And I was like, why is this so difficult for me? And I think that's when it clicked. That like, okay, this change that I'm reading and writing, theories about and that I'm researching about, my product is that change. Instead of, saying that we need to create more jobs, I can create jobs for people who have a difficult time entering the job market. Instead of talking about climate change, I have created a product that means 70% less emissions. So obviously that makes a big difference. And so I was like, okay, so if I really want to work with, change, then I need to work with Vegan Delights. It's Vegan Delights. And obviously that made me go like, what? Like, I'm gonna work with Vegan Delights, the thing that I felt so much resistance towards during all this time. But I was like, yeah, that is what I'm going to do. So that was like the spring of 2020, and we're entering a pandemic. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna sit here, I'm gonna live with my mom, I'm gonna start my own business in the middle of a pandemic and make it work. So it took me about 6 months to actually start the business, and we got a contract manufacturer. Did not work out, wasn't really what I wanted to do at first, but that's how I really understood that the demand was there and that there was a future for my business. And I was like, okay, but now I'm really taking a leap of faith. I'm registering like this business under my name. I did it with my mom and my uncle, and I was like, I'm actually doing this. And this is gonna be my full-time job now. I'm not gonna have a pay. I've graduated from university. My friends are, buying apartments, getting real jobs. And here I am. I'm not gonna get paid. I just have this vision and I know what I wanna do. And at that time I thought it wasn't gonna take as long as it has taken. But I was like, okay, it's gonna be, 2-3 years, and then we're gonna get there. And it's not gonna be difficult. I was very wrong about that part of it. I think that a lot of people, when they start their first business, they think they're just going to become successful within the first week, but that's not how it works. It's hard. It's really, really hard. So anyways, I started this, and in the spring of 2021, I knew that I had to start production myself. So I rented a kitchen in the broker coffee roastery that was in Ultuna. I rented his kitchen because this was a place that I would pass every time that I was going to the gym. And there was this big space next to it, a big empty room, and it had these beautiful windows. And I was like, that's where I want my factory to be, but obviously I cannot afford it, so I don't know why I'm tripping. So I went to Yuan, who owns the broker, and I asked him, I was like, you've closed down your cafe because of the pandemic, could I rent it and produce chocolate here? And he was like, yeah, of course you can. So I did that. And one day I was just like, okay, I'll just go see how much the rent is for that space. I sat down with a company that was renting the place out. We started speaking about the fact that I wanted a chocolate factory there. And, you know, there I was, a 25-year-old girl saying that, like, yes, I want to build my own factory. And I was lucky enough to have this amazing person there with me from this company, and she was like, you know what, I believe in you. So they agreed that they would fix the room, I would get my checkered floors because I wanted that, and they would fix the factory, and it would take them like 5-6 months. And I was like, okay. Terrified as I was, I signed the lease. I was like, let's do this. I don't know, when I think back at it at 25, I'm like, what was I thinking? Like, how could I have done that? But I did it. And so in September of 2021, we moved into the new chocolate factory, which is the same chocolate factory that we have now in Ultuna. And it was just the feeling, there was so much fear mixed in with joy, with excitement, and it was just, I can't describe how any of this felt. It was just really, really cool. And we had our grand opening and it was completely wild. Like, there were people queuing up to get into the factory, and it was just so beautiful. It was so beautiful. I don't know how to describe it, and I got really emotional, and I think that's when it really started. That's when the journey really begun with Vegan Delights, like the full-on intense journey that I've been on since. So there I was, a 26-year-old girl with a chocolate factory. The difficult times really begun after that. And I'm gonna go into that in the next episode, because this was just an introduction of how I ended up here, how I ended up in my chocolate factory in Ultuna. I hope you'll be with me for the next episode of Life at a Chocolate Factory. I'll get into the rest of the journey and how it got really dark, because that started happening in 2022. That's when it all begun. But I'll get into that in the next episode. So thank you so much, guys. See you soon.